Welcome on the stage, gentlemen. Let's give them a round of applause.
So I think this is a great opportunity to add some meat to the great presentations we've had. DAOs are a very new topic. Probably most of you haven't really touched it yet, or except for these brilliant presentations. So the purpose of this panel is, first of all, to add some use cases and help us figure out how useful they can be in our society, and then also to tackle some key topics such as decentralization, what is it, and how useful is it. So I'll start with a simple question, or not that simple, as first for all of you, but we'll start with Nishant. How would you define a DAO in just one sentence?
Open source organizations.
Yeah, I think the best definition for people outside of the industry to understand what it is like a group chat with a shared bank account. Like it's one that you can understand even if you have no idea what the D, A, and L stand for.
Yeah, I would say a digital decentralized coordination system.
Sounds more technical. Well, thank you. I think, yeah, I want to dig into the different use cases. You already touched on them, but I think DAOs seem to be offering solutions in certain cases, but in other cases, they're not useful at all. So it would be interesting to hear first with you, Nathan, where you think at this point they are relevant and where you think that they're maybe not relevant at all, and where they maybe have been used, but it was not appropriate.
I think what's really interesting is that, to kind of piggyback on my presentation, some organizations can really benefit from decentralization, and they can really benefit from transparency. And I'm thinking about, Ivan was mentioning Unchained Fund, this charity where you donated and money went directly to Ukraine. And you think about the ways that charity work today, and the structures around them, and the relative opacity in some of these. And it makes a ton of sense. And it always makes me think of, I heard one day that in Sweden, if you donated your blood, if someone has a car accident and receives your blood, you receive a text message saying, they gave away your blood, like you saved someone. And I always thought, like, this is amazing, just because of the transparency. Like, I'd be 3 times happier than giving my blood away in Sweden, because I'd be like, that's awesome. And so this transparency that DAOs can bring is incredibly motivating for the people that want to participate.
And then maybe one case where it's been used, but you were like, why did they do it?
I think there's an issue sometimes with DAOs that are created to absolve responsibility. And I was mentioning that Snapshot Labs, our company, isn't fully a DAO yet, because right now we need a leader. We need our founder is in the weeds every day, and we can't take all of the added baggage of being a DAO and having to run things through governance in many ways. And so I think many projects become DAOs too soon. DAOs are a very strong coordination mechanism when there's already a product, there's a clear goal for the community. Creating a DAO with having in mind, like, let's first make the DAO and then let's figure out what we're going to do, is not always a good strategy.
Makes a lot of sense. How about you, Ivan?
Yeah, I just building on what Nathan mentioned, I think we've seen that DAOs are pretty terrible at rapid execution. So early on in the life cycle of an organization, especially if it's like a product-oriented organization, being a DAO is doing more harm than good, right? And let's also not kid ourselves. A lot of the DAOs today are DAOs because they used tokens to fundraise, and then they were like, oh yeah, let's make it a DAO, so like it doesn't look like we rug pulled. Like I don't think a lot of organizations have thought through, like, does it make sense to be a DAO? And there are a lot of situations where it really, like, adds more complexity than benefit.
I do agree with you, and I think it's similar to, does it make sense to have a token? In the Web3 space, we have a lot of projects who have a token, but we sometimes wonder whether it's appropriate. How about you, Nishant?
Generally speaking, I think problems which require creativity are more suited for individuals, and problems which require optimization, they are very good use cases for DAO. So let's say if a founder or a team has found the product market fit, then perhaps DAO will do a good job to take it further, expand it, as is happening in many open source projects. But yeah, like initial phases and those that require creativity, often that comes from individuals, I think. And as I was saying in my presentation, that if you're just making DAO for DAO's sake, and people have very marginal role just in terms of voting, then you would have very poor participation, as we see in many of the DAOs which just were created for the founding team, but they have created some sort of voting, just to call themselves DAO.
You just mentioned participation. I think it makes a lot of sense to, dig into this, and especially you, Nathan, you're through Snapshot. Can you give us a glimpse of what the state of participation is, and how do you define participation for everyone here?
So let's start with something. It's not great. A lot of people, they have tokens and they don't participate in these DAOs because, well, I really think about it. You've got two levers you can pull, and there's one that we can pull as Snapshot, and there's one that DAOs have to take care of. The one we have is making voting as frictionless as possible. So I think a big change that Snapshot brought was, well, votes were costing money, but the architecture of Snapshot allows us...
Participation?
Yeah.
Can you just define it?
Sorry. Yeah, I'll define participation. So DAOs vote. DAOs vote on issues. And over 100% of the tokens that are distributed amongst different people, it's honestly rare to see above 10% of these tokens being used in governance, with strong exceptions. There's big exceptions to this observation, but it's sad. The participation sucks everywhere. Let's be honest. Like, I think the last French elections had one of the lowest participation score ever, and I think it comes from many things. It comes from lack of bandwidth, lack of interest, and sometimes it also comes from just the fact that people think it's going to be fine. I want to abstain, and I'm not voting. That exists as well. So to kind of explain the issue, on the one side, you're going to make voting as easy as possible, and you want it on mobile. You want it very easy to access, and if we're really going to live in the world that I want to live in, I want to live in a DAO. I hope that Belgium is going to be a DAO. And I think it's going to happen. But that's a contrarian bet. I'll accept it. and once this happens, the reasons why I will go and vote is because my vote is impactful. If the votes suck, if the DAO is a theater of decentralization that doesn't actually give anything serious for its token holders to vote on, how do you expect to keep them interested, So I think on our side, we're going to make it super frictionless. But on the side of DAOs, they've got to make it extremely impactful and actually give the keys to the castle to the community, not just what color do you want the UI to be,
I have a counter take.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, of course, man.
Actually, like 10% is an amazing result, right? Because pushing it beyond that is changing human nature. So long before we decided to call them DAOs, right? Like, there is research on digital communities, and the natural split is 1% actively creates value and contributes, 9% are somewhat engaged, 90% are lurkers. There was a lurker DAO, by the way, so it's a common problem. So literally, like, honestly, pushing beyond 10% participation is trying to change human nature. And I mean, 10% deserves a pat on the shoulder, right? obviously there is delegation in some organizations, and like these 10% that are actively participating in some way, shape, or form can represent a substantially bigger group of like subset of the community. But we can't really expect, like, I mean, I'm a member of like 100 and something DAOs, right? Like I can't really participate in every single one. And it holds true for a lot of people, right? Like you have to, in a way, pick your battles. If we had presidential elections every week, like in about a month, people would just stop voting because it makes no sense.
So do you think delegation would be a solution?
It is, maybe it's not the best solution. It's probably the best we currently have. There are a lot of problems with it, like people, you know, we've seen that even if the delegate is misbehaving, like once you've delegated to someone, like undelegating and redelegating to someone else doesn't make a lot of, it just, people don't do it, right? So enforcing some sort of term might be a solution. It's a direction in the design space that's underexplored at the moment.
I definitely think, if I can respond to this, that you're touching on something super interesting, which is obviously we live in representative democracies. Everywhere in Europe is representative democracies. Apart from maybe Switzerland, there's very few direct democracies at scale. And if you ask Swiss people, do you like voting every 2 weeks? They hate it. And in general, we also, I think in many ways, the concept of liquid democracy, where you can delegate individually on certain, based on certain considerations. For example, I don't want to delegate my voting power on the issues of the economy to the same political party. I would like to delegate my voting power on the issues of, I don't know, ecology or other issues like this. And if we can manage to build a delegation system that is extremely frictionless and liquid, then we'll see more of it. Because I agree with you, there's something really weird about the fact that people don't redelegate. And we have these delegation systems, but people just use it once and then forget about it. And I think that's not a human problem, that's a UX problem in many ways.
Okay, very, very interesting points. Let me try to reframe it or bring a different perspective. I think 2005 onwards, when Facebook came, perhaps that is what is shaping our mentality, because it was really about numbers, mass. The groups would have thousands of people. The threshold to join groups was very low. Liking started meaning, again, very low friction thing. And we were really after numbers. And the reason was they were in attention economy. They just wanted us to scroll, 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 be part of it. And being part meant just clicking one join button and, joining a group. And perhaps that baggage is still coming, right? Like we think that, okay, just buy 2 tokens, become part of a DAO, and the more means better. But perhaps, we need to make that distinction between a contributing member versus those who are just maybe there to digest that what's going on, I'm checking these 5 things, so something like that. So I would think that perhaps the attention economy of greater numbers is somewhere shaping the mentality, and we have to redesign or rethink, reframe this for the new economy which is now coming.
So you also touched upon the idea of centralization versus decentralization, which is essential in this space, and we know decentralization is probably the key word in the Web3 space. But within DAOs, it takes its own shape. So I'd be curious to hear how you think decentralization, how you would describe it within DAOs, but also explain this dilemma when it's appropriate to have a centralized entity or company versus decentralized. I think, for example, if you want swift and fast decision-making, you can't submit an idea to be voted on because it's going to take 2 or 3 days to be acted on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I loved the slide in your presentation that said, let's not reinvent the wheel. There's a lot that because we're building this new coordination mechanism, we feel like we have to rebuild social structures inside of it that people have been thinking about for a long time. Like stuff like holacracy is so interesting. There's so much there that we need to adapt to the ways that DAOs function. Just this idea that the closest person to the task that is competent enough to solve it should just solve it, should just go ahead and solve it. And that's the power of networks, more than pyramids. And we're realizing that everywhere right now. You know, YouTube has more views than television because the content creators are working in a way that is very, very free and, you know, very direct. And in many ways, when I think about decentralization, I'm thinking about decentralization of access. I'm thinking anyone, you know, I think at Snapshot, we've got about 12 people working and we've got 11 nationalities. It's decentralization is not just the way that we make decisions. You know, obviously our decision making is very different because we're voting on things, we're collaborating on solutions and everything. But decentralization is also about access to the way that to the organizations that are building this huge change in Web3. And let's be honest, like right now, most of the DAOs are Web3 focused. They're DAOs around NFTs, they're DAOs around DeFi protocols. This is changing. I'm so happy to see much more DAOs coming from outside of it. But when I'm talking about decentralized autonomous organizations, the decentralized comes from the accessibility, the power, and the decision making, I think.
Ivan?
I'm speechless. No, like I think Nathan covered most of it, and yeah, I'm just
Fair enough.
I'm gonna keep quiet.
I think more concretely, if I'm a manager and I own a company, for example, if I'm the CEO of a bank or an FMCG, and I'm thinking, wow, DAOs, this could be super useful for my firm. What concretely can I put in place? Where is it relevant to have a DAO within my firm? Is it to ask them to vote on the next product I want to develop, or what kind of example would you give?
That's like the lowest hanging fruit. Like it's absurd that loyalty programs are not governance tokens yet, and like the reason why loyalty programs are not governance tokens yet, the fault is with the regulators, because every big consumer-facing brand I've spoken with don't want to do this because it's a regulatory gray area, but it would drastically improve brand loyalty, right? Like, I don't know, like I have a loyalty card with Nike because I buy their stuff, right? And then at some point it's like, oh, we have whatever, 3,000 points, vote on our next sneaker. And that's, I mean, it will improve dramatically my sense of association, especially if like the design I voted on ends up being produced. I'll tell like everyone on the planet that is unfortunate enough to listen to me, that like, yo, I designed this sneaker, well, in a way, right? And like, but the other thing is, on the flip side, Nike and other consumer-facing brands are spending so much money on consumer sentiment research. Why? Like, why pay an intermediary when you can like give that value back to your user?
Do you want to give another example of maybe a firm you think could definitely implement a DAO?
Actually, a lot of firms can, and I'll build on what you said previously, about the team structure. So the thing is, most important is to define or segregate the types of decisions involved, okay? So maybe some decisions can be taken at a small team level, which actually has the skin in the game and which can execute it faster. And there are certain types of decisions which can be taken at a, that complete DAO level. It can be a service agency where teams are taking decisions on their project level, and like certain decision whether to do this project as a whole or to invest or not in this project can be taken at a higher level. So I think both the centralization aspect and decentralization aspect can coincide side by side, I guess.
I'm looking for use cases, guys. I'm looking for examples.
I mean, I think Ivan said you know, maybe one of the problems about the way we think about DAOs is kind of this 0 to 1. You're not a DAO or you're a DAO. And the truth is, it's a spectrum. You're somewhere along that spectrum. And if Nike starts having a governance token, it's not even a governance token. It's a loyalty token. It's not even linked to equity. It's not linked to any financial upside. It's just a way to reward people that are working, that are enjoying the product and that are using it. This is, as you said, low-hanging fruit. You start there, and from there you realize, oh, all right, let's forget about Nike. Let's say the Brussels Blockchain Conference. You're like, actually, these people, they keep on coming, and they like what we do, and I would like them to choose our next speaker. I would like them to participate, even maybe create. And you start with these loyalty tokens, and then you're like, actually, it would make sense if the way that we put on these conferences, we share a bank account, an on-chain Gnosis Safe, for example, and this is what's used to fund this conference. And then you're like, yeah, but then we could even have elections about like who runs Brussels Blockchain Conference. And step by step, you're DAOifying, if that's a word, And step by step, you're bringing this, and this works with any organization that you can think of. I spent way too long playing games when I was younger. And the other day, I was talking with a friend who was telling me, can you imagine if you had like a token for every game, every game that you've played, but like every single 15-minute game, and then that allows you to vote on balance changes. And then, because you played a lot, you probably know, like, this character, a little bit too overpowered. I want to, and all of these organizations, I struggle to see that many that wouldn't benefit from, starting to, walk a little bit on that road of decentralization and see where it leads them. And that's why I think it's always fun when I'm trying to convince traditional companies, you should be a DAO, you should use this tooling. I just need to get their foot through the door, If their foot is through the door, I know that they're going to walk into it themselves because there's such cool benefits to decentralization. And there's many organizations that will never go the whole way, and that's fine. No worries about that. We're not here to turn all of the organizations in the world into DAOs. We're just here to bring that tooling and see where they take it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think other use cases could be an airline just asking its customers what next route it should open up.
Yeah.
Or even stars, like someone like Angèle, who we all know is a famous Belgian singer.
Yeah.
She could have a token with all her fans, and the fans can vote what the title of her next song is going to be. And I think it's vastly underestimated how powerful of a marketing tool and a tool to connect with your community is.
Yeah, that's why I think we're all thinking the same. It's not that DAOs are this cool idea, maybe it's going to happen, maybe it's not going to happen. It's absolutely inevitable. Because obviously, as a content creator, this is such powerful tools. Obviously, you're going to use them.
I couldn't agree more. I think we're all sold on the idea. And another point, and it was already briefly mentioned, in the Web3 space, so we spoke about tokens a lot. So when usually when entrepreneurs are going to launch a company, they're first going to issue equity, so create a normal firm, and then they're going to create a token. And slowly, ideally slowly, they're going to create a DAO. And this DAO is with the token, you can vote within the DAO. And slowly, the DAO is going to get more and more power on the firm, and it's going to decentralize. Like, maybe you, Ivan, I know I already described part of the process, but like, is there anything you want to highlight in this process, how important it is to be maybe structured and go in a sort of structured way, or whether you think you can mix it up and just go full on?
Well, I mean, it depends on the stage of the maturity and the needs of the organization, right? Like, I think, and hopefully, regulators will do their job, and the differential between traditional equity and governance tokens is gonna be decreasing. But something that that is, I think, very liberating, or could be, is if you think about like traditional meat space, right? Like you create a startup, you're a SaaS company, right? Like your first few subscribers, they are more important than the venture funds backing you because they're giving you capital. against nothing, right? Like they're taking the same risk. If you're a SaaS and you're servicing me and you fail three months or 3 years down the line, I have to go look for a new vendor. Like I have a massive disadvantage. And I have no upside. If you do really well, the best thing I'm going to enjoy is probably deteriorating service quality, right? So you as a business being able to be like, yo, Ivan, like you're my first client. I'm going to like kick back some equity to you because you believed in me before anyone else. It's something that, and like the exact mechanism, whether it's token, whether it's equity, is relevant, right? It's about equitably distributing value that's being created in the system.
Yeah. Transforming like users into evangelists of your product is such a powerful idea.
You're not telling about arrogance, progressive decentralization?
That's a tough one. I plead the fifth. No, I mean we're going through this journey, and it's like it's a challenge, right? It's like people have different views of what a DAO is and how a DAO should function, and inherently by being one of the earliest organizations to start building something in the direction of DAOs, we attract a very diverse set of thinkers that are strongly opinionated, right? And then how do you coordinate? How do you make sure that you have a functional design that you can iterate on when like you have people who are like at the forefront of academic thinking and they're like, oh yeah, let's experiment, but like it has to first work, right? Like the Gauss law, design something simple that works and then like iteratively make it more complex instead of like over design and over engineer from the beginning. And it is a lengthy process, and a lot of people will be attracted by the way this process is happening. A lot of people will turn away, and ultimately it's a free access network, right? Like it's an opt-in. If you like the direction, you can join. To your point, like more doesn't mean better, right? Like you like where the organization is going. You align with the values and the direction. You join this organization, start contributing. You start getting equity into what you're building. And if you don't, like there are other organizations that would make other strategic trade-offs, and you would go join them.
Nothing to add? Cool. I think my next question would be more linked to the challenges we spoke about DAO adoption, get your foot in the door. So in your view, Nishant, what are the main challenges to the future adoption of DAOs?
I think for first and foremost, we need some more successful examples which are doing, so that's why when we talk to customers, it's not that we say that just go to the SaaS and, do the token creation and stuff. There is a process before that, really figuring out that what is the microeconomy you are creating, and who are the stakeholders, and why would they care to be part of it, or you will align their interests. So I think once people start doing that more and more, these fundamental questions, rather than just thinking that, oh, let's do a hashtag DAO and do some voting and fundraise, I think this understanding of fundamental is very important beyond just a sensational thing.
You, Ivan?
Yeah. I completely agree. Like we've seen a lot of DAOs pop up now because, let's be honest, the speculators in Web3 have shown less prudent investment decision-making process than traditional venture firms. It was pretty easy to sell a shitcoin and call it a DAO, and thankfully and hopefully, now that things are not working this way, it will be more conscious decision making of like, do I need to create a DAO? When should I create a DAO? Who are the people? What are the incentives I wanna give? What are the actions I wanna get from different stakeholders? But to answer your question, two obstacles to adoption. User experience is clunky for anything except speculation. Regulation is atrocious. Like the existing regulatory uncertainty is atrocious to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, regulation.
You think UX is user experience is on point, or you think we can improve?
That's a good one as well. I think UX definitely deserves some work. However, there's something about DAO user experience that is very organic, you know. Probably the most important platform for DAOs is Discord, because it's not about voting in the end, it's about getting to know each other, understanding together what you want to build through social consensus, and then sometimes you vote on some things. But to be honest, I think DAOs overvote very often on a lot of things. So it's a lot about figuring out as a group, as an organization, what you want to do, what you want to be, and then having the right regulatory framework to make that vision happen. And I think, yeah, both parts are complicated, but one part is complicated but fixable through hard work, and the other part you're just stuck. You know, you're just stuck being scared that next time you have a connecting flight in the United States, you're going to go to jail because you distributed a governance token. You know, it's kind of ridiculous.
We can fix the UI in the industry.
Yeah.
Like the regulation is the one bit that people here cannot. Really.
Well, not us.
Yeah, at least not us. We
Regulators,
can't really fix
we're
that.
counting on you.
I just wanted to add on the UX bit, so I think even before you have UX strategy, which means that the point of view on how people will coordinate, or what are the different business models which will have different kind of flows, So I think still a lot of experimentation is going in that space. Like Colony has a very different approach now. Aragon is also evolving from their previous approach. So what we have to remember, before there is a UX, you need a UX strategy, which means like a deeper understanding of what we talked about on a high level, human coordination and different types, and which type matches which type of problem solving. And I think once that clarity starts coming, or people from traditional organizations or anthropologists come, social scientists come, I think this will improve.
Yeah. In many ways, I think you're absolutely right. In many ways, first you construct the underlying tech, and you can be slightly opinionated, but I think good infrastructure is not opinionated at all. And then people who are really, really smart about these things are going to come into the space, and they're going to help DAOs figure out, okay, what is our operating system in a human, from a human point of view? How do we function together? And in many ways, kind of like crypto has always been, it's nerds putting their views on certain tech issues. And what I'm super excited about is for DAO UX to be really clean, really nice. It's kind of weird that I'm not going to convince all my friends to get a MetaMask to participate in the DAO. Ideally, I wouldn't want them to need, some let's say, blockchain know-how to participate in DAOs. And I think when that happens, when people realize the power that decentralizing your organization can have, then you're going to have people who are going to fix the UX strategy side. But I don't think it's us, to be honest. I think it's better that it's not us. You can't do everything in building such an important project.
And then I guess my final question would be, jumping into regulation more specifically in Europe. Do you think we're already lagging behind countries like the States, or do you think we're still on par and there's a lot to be built everywhere?
I mean, I think there's a completely faulty logic in the way that regulation around crypto in general is approached. It's because, and I get where it comes from. It comes from the fact that people think of crypto and think of Web3, DAOs, DeFi protocols with the same lines of thinking that they've thought about payment system. But I mean, if you've been listening since the beginning of these DAOs presentation and everything, obviously this has nothing to do with things that already exist. And DeFi protocols in many ways have nothing to do with Swift. So don't try to regulate Uniswap the same way you're trying to regulate Swift. But it's hard to explain that to regulators. And to be honest, I'm kind of hard on regulators here, but all of the regulators I talk to one by one, they're so knowledgeable. It's incredible. They know so much about this space, and I find these conversations incredible. What often is problematic is that there's so few politicians that are ready to throw their weight around in that area. So regulators understand it, but when it comes to actually putting this into law, bringing this to the European Parliament or the Belgian Parliament, there's not that many people left.
Anything you guys want to add to this?
Yeah, I think like one of the drawbacks is that there is this idea of like, oh, we're gonna just like figure this out and like blanket regulate it, but the space is rediscovering itself every 9 months. You cannot come up with a blanket regulation. At the same time, they're very distinct bad actors in the space, right? 2017, 2018, there was a team that raised like $4 freaking billion, and they shipped nothing. You know, we've had unregulated or like organizations portraying themselves as DeFi and whatever, and then they're like literally running a hedge fund in the background. Like those are clear bad actors.
Yeah.
Why over-regulate and ask every single individual that has a MetaMask to like disclose their identity, create this massive honeypot of identities, and become a target when they're like clear individuals and organizations that are acting in bad faith in this industry? Why not go after them, make an example of them, and then like others that have this set of values, they would see like, oh shit, like if I do something bad, I'm gonna go to jail for the rest of my life. Like, you know, it's simple incentives.
Your question was about US versus Europe, and I think Europe is lagging a bit. You know, for example, I was talking to some investors in Netherlands, and most of them were saying that, you know, we cannot yet invest in, you know, tokens, by tokens, you know, we still invest in equity, for example. But if you see in US, like it's so much, you know, further on in this space. So I think generally in Europe, some countries are quite progressive. Of course, you know, Portugal is becoming a hotbed, and Switzerland. But, you know, others, I think maybe if at all they acknowledge that, you know, regulation always follows innovation and let things happen instead of trying to strangle it early on, I think it will be in everyone's benefit.
Excellent. Well, Nishant, Ivan, Nathan, it was a pleasure to have you guys. Very lucky to have some of the leading figures in the DAO space, not the NFT space. So thanks a lot, guys.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Thanks
Cheers.
for having us.
Thank you so much.